This is Gemara Nazir Daf Chof Ches. We're holding the bottom of Chav Zayin Amud Beis. Yesterday we actually read all the way to the bottom as there is a long and lengthy brisa that the Gemara is quoting right now. And the brisa is a shaila that Rava is bringing. A kasha. Masiv Rava, about 14 lines on the bottom. The first one line is a demei. Masiv Rava is bothered with, and he's asking on the din that we spoke about, that a behema bal mum, we spoke about, is the din of ma'is. This is the din of Rav Huna, as explained by Rav Nachman, meaning Rav Nachman further quantified the din of Rav Huna on Chavav and Beis, that a behema bal mum has the din of ma'is. What's the difference as the din of ma'is? This brings us back to Rav Yochanan, back to the Mishnah, the halacha l'Moshe miSinai, that ma'is stumim yiblu linit dava. So Mosiv Rava, let's just start reading from there again to give us a bit of a head start. Karbana says in the Torah, his karban b'karbana yu yoytze v'in yoytze b'karban aviv. Then he's not yoytze with the karban of his father. Yachal, I would think yoytze b'karban shel aviv. I would think, when are you not yoytze with the karban of your father, who is shefresh min hakala chamura min chamura lakala? If they're different level aveiros, if you separate, if it's something light on heavy and heavy on light, stringent and lenient, aval yoytze b'karban shefresh avim min hakala alakala min chamura lachamura. But I would think you are yoytze if they're on same level. If it's a lenient aveira for a lenient aveira karban, or stringent for stringent. Talmud Loimar says the Torah karbanoi. From here we have Xer Shavah to teach us b'karbanoi hu yoytze. You only yoytze with your own karban and not hu yoytze. Ve'enu yoytze b'karban shalaviv. And now this second case is the case of the kash. Yachal, I would think yoytze b'karban aviv bebehema she'ifresh. You would think that you're not yoytze with the animal of your father. Afilu min hakala lakalu min hachamura lachamura. Shaharei ein adam migalech al behimas aviv ben naziros. One cannot shave, one cannot perform the concluding services of naziros for utilizing his father's animal. Aval yoytze, but you are yoytze b'moi shefresh aviv min hachamura lakala. That's what you would think. So we see clearly right here in the equation of the brisa that there's clearly a difference between behema and mois. And therefore the Gemara is going to articulate the shaila in a few moments, the kasha, when we turn over to Chav Ches Amud Aleph. But if this behema is a behema balmum, which the Gemara is going to assume, then it would be a kasha, because clearly a behema balmum is different din of mois. Continues the brisa, don't say that. Sharei adam megalech hamois aviv bin naziros. A person does shave with the money of his fathers with by naziros bizman. As we turn over to Chav Ches Amud Aleph, bizman shehein stumim v'loy bizman shehein mufurashin. Bizman shehein stumim, when the money is unspecified, and not when the money is specified. And where do we know this from? Says the brisa of the second line of Chav Ches Amud Beis, Talmud Loimar, to teach us not that way. Karbanoi, that what? B'karbana yu yoytze, ve'ena yoytze b'karban aviv. And now another case, and again, as classical, we quote the brisa and it's full, even though this part of the brisa really has nothing to do with our discussion. But aval yoytze b'karban shefresh la'atzmai min hakala chamura min chamura lakala. Now we're going to the next year, and fine, granted, you can use your father as karbanis, but I would think my own karbanis that I could do. Talmud loymar karbanai al chatasai actually karbanai l'shom chetoi, for the sin that you did. Yachal the next year. Maybe you're not yoytze for your own animal that you separated for a different aveira. Why? That you cannot bring a karban for a different aveira. Sharei loy ma'al v'loy keeper. You don't get your kapara unless it's for the specific avera that you did. Avol, you are yes, yoytze b'moi shifresh liyatzmai. Min hakal lekal, min hachamur lechamura, or min hachamur lekal, min hakal lechamura, shekein. Imifresh latzoi mois. Just like we find if you separated money to bring the karbanos, min hachelev vevi al adam vevi al hachelev. Shaharei ma'al v'kiper, tamalomer al cheta soi. Ad she'ei karbanai l'shom chetoi. And a very long and lengthy brisa. And at the end of this incredible brisa, now the Gemara articulates the detail that we spoke out back from case number 2 on Chav Zayin Amud Beis, Katani Miyas. 5 lines on the bottom. What do we see? Behema. There was a case of an animal. My love suggests the Gemara afilu balasmom seemingly can include it behema balasmom, and yet what do we see? Yeah, we see it as a different din of ma'ois stumim. Says the Gemara. Says the Gemara. 1 second. 1 second. Meaning that if it had the same din of ma'ois stumim, then it would have been the same that you could bring the carbon like by ma'ois stumim. Yet, and this would not be the same thing as that which Rav Nachman said on Daf Yomi base. Rav Nachman, as we explaining Rav Huna, said that Mois Stumin and Behema Balmum are one and the same. We see clearly not that way. Answers the Gemara, Lai Tamima. Talking about a Behema which is pure. Aval Balas Mamai, what would the din be? Kistuma Dami. But would a Behema Balmum have the same din as Mois Stumin? Ma'iri Tiktani Mois. So why did the Brisa talk about a case of money? Why didn't you just talk about a case of behema b'halmam, a bigger chiddush? Says the Gemara, hachanami, it did. Because dilamai del chazi lidmi, demei hainu ma'is. The Brisa seemed to us like we saw yesterday, a blemished animal, what is it for? It's for money. And the Brisa said something value is money, and therefore included intrinsically in the case of Brisa, says the Gemara, is a behemas ba'al. And we continue with the Mishnah, going back to our theme of Naziros, of a husband annulling the Naziris of her wife. And the question is, at what point can he annul the Naziris? Says the Mishnah, Nizik ala echad min adamim. There's 3 karbanos, as we know already. There's an asham, chatas, and shlamim. And of course, every carbon concludes with the zrika, the sprinkling of the blood. So says the Mishnah, once they did 1 zrika of the karbanos, einay yachol lahafer. The husband cannot be made for the nadarim anymore. At that point, it is considered that her naziris is finished and he cannot be made for the neder. Rabbi Akiva disagrees, 4 lines on the wide lines, and Rabbi Akiva, Oimer, afilu nishcha lea achas mikol behemos. At an earlier stage, says Rabbi Akiva, now when you do the zrika, even when you merely did 1 shchita, ein a yachal lahafer, he cannot be made for a neder anymore. Explains the Gemara Medvar Murim, when is this? Betiglachas ata'ira. This is talking about the tiglachas. This is talking about the karbanos that are bought when hata'ira, when she is tar, meaning she's concluding her naziris for good purposes. She did her 30 days or whatever it was. Now she's been the karbanos. Avol betiglachas hatoma. But let's say she's concluding her naziris. Why? Because she became tamei, and that's why she has to bring the karbanos. Then the halacha is yafer. Says the Mishnah, then he can, yes, be made for the neder even after she brought the karbanos. Shehu yachal leimar, yav shebisha v'nevelos. Because he could say, I don't want a wife who is minovel, who is disgusting, but in the fact that she is shaving her head. And Rameir Aimer in the first white line, yafer, says Rameir, arguing on the Tanakama and Rabbi Akiva, even by tiglachas hata'ira, even if they're concluding the neder for good purposes, the husband could still be made for all the way to the end. Why? He could say, I don't want a woman that is excuse me, I read that wrong. When it said minavelas a moment ago, it meant a woman that's disgusting. It wasn't referring to the fact that she's shaving her head. It was referring to the fact that she didn't have to undergo another nazirus process, not drink wine, etc. again. Therefore, the husband said, I don't want that. I want a wife who could drink wine, etc. Rav Meir is saying that until the very end, he's allowed to be made for the neder. Why? Because he can say, I don't want my wife to have to shave off her hair, etc. Says the Gemara, Masnisan de like Rav Eliezer. The Mishnah is clearly not like Rav Eliezer. Who's Rav Eliezer? The Rav Eliezer, Amar Tiglachas Ma'akeves. Rav Eliezer holds that what is the final straw on the camel's back? When is the final nikudah? When does Nazirus end? By tiglachas, by shaving off the head. So the Mishnah clearly is not that way. Why? Because as long as she did not shave her head, asira bechamra, she's not allowed to drink wine. Given the isla nivel, mati mefer. And this brings us back to a sugya that we learned extensively in the Darim, that because she's going to be minovel, what's the minovel? That she's not drinking wine. The husband's allowed to say, I don't want a wife that doesn't drink wine. So says the Gemara from the fact that in the Mishnah we have a Tanakama, Rav Akiva, who discuss whether it's at the point of the zrika of the carbon, whether it's at the point of the bringing shchita of the carbon. It's clearly not like Rav Eliezer, because they're clearly discussing, as the Gemara is now going to further qualify, they're clearly discussing at what point they consider the Nazirus to be over. Is the Nazirus over at the Zrika, or is the Nazirus over at the Shchita? That's clearly meaning, what do you mean Nazirus over? At what point does she have to stop drinking wine? Could she, start drinking wine again? So Rabbi Kiva and the Chachamim are clearly debating that detail. So says the Gemara, it's not like Rav Eliezer, because Rav Eliezer says they could drink wine until when? She could drink wine until when? All the way until she gets the haircut, until she shaves her head. So says the Gemara, as we turn over to Chav Chesem and Beis, articulating this detail that we just said, Tanadi Dan Savar, our Mishnah holds, Kivan de Izderik Alodam, once you do the Zrika, La Alter Sharia Bechamra, like we just explained. Right away she could drink wine. V'halasle nivel, and therefore she's not going to be disgusting. She's not going to be deprived, is a better word for nivel. Now usually deprivation causes one to be disgusting. But she's not going to be deprived. And that's the reason why in the Mishnah, at the point of Zurika, the Tanakama held, you can no longer be made for a neder. Whereas Rav Kiva Savar, Rav Kiva holds, no. Afilu ishtichis behema at an earlier stage, even once the shchita happens, inu yachal hafer. Why? Misham hafsid kachim. Rav Kiva, now the Gemara is explaining, not because Rav Kiva holds that at the detail, at the moment of shchita, she can't drink wine anymore. She can, start drinking wine again, That's not the reason. Rav Kiva has a different reason. Rav Kiva holds, as soon as you do the shchita, the husband can't be made for the neder. You know why? Because it's going to cause the carbon to get lost, because you're not going to be able to do anything with this carbon, and because of the hefsid of kachim. Again, let's just play it out. If the husband were going to go and be made for the neder after the shchita, you can't bring this carbon anymore, because the woman's not a nazira. So says Rav Kiva, the moment that the husband, incorrect, the moment that they do shchita for the wife, the husband can no longer be made for the neder. 4 lines down, Chav Chesem and Beis Maskevla Rav Zeira, ask Rav Zeira, why is there going to be a hefsid kachim? Why is this carbon going to get lost? V'amai lizroi daman shalei lishman. Says Rav Zeira, I got it. They did a shchita on the carbon. They slaughtered this animal. The husband annuls the nazirus. So you're right. You can't bring this carbon anymore for this woman as her carbon nazir. But says Rav Zeira, I don't get it. Let them do the zrika for a different purpose. And then the yatir basar, the halacha is ba'achila. If you do the zrika for a different purpose, not for the carbon nazir, because you're right, she's not a nazir because the husband annulled the vow. The halacha is going to be, you could eat the carbon. Mi loy tanya, do we not learn in a braysa? Kivsei atzeresh shachtan shaloi lishman. What is the status of a carbon, the sheeps of Shavuos? That when shachted shaloi lishman, or shachted lifnei zmanon, or you slaughtered them before the appropriate time, or la'achar zman, or after the appropriate time. Meaning all cases that the carbon is possible. So what do you do now with the kivsei aseres? Do you just have to let it wait till it gets a mum and then you throw it out? No. Hadam yizroik. You do the sirika on the dam, v'habasar yoichal, and you'll have to eat the flesh. V'maisa Shabbos, says the Braisa, then lo yizrik, you can't do the zrika. V'im zarak, and if you did it, hortza, it's going to work. Lahakta imun la'erev, to burn the limbs in the evening. So I asked the Gemara, I don't understand why, according to Rabbi Kiva, are we saying that we're worried about hefsid kachim, that you're going to have to throw out this carbon? It's not true. You could do the zrika for a different purpose, shalai lishman, and then you'll be able to eat the carbon. Answers the Gemara about 10 lines down. First one line is la'erev amri. They answered, id shachat oila oy shlamim hachanami. Rav Akiva would agree with you that if the shchita that we're talking about in the Mishnah was either the carbon oila or the carbon shlamim, then correct, you could do the zrika shlei lishman, and you'll be able to eat the carbon, and we agree with you, says Rav Akiva. Elahach v'mayaskin, and what's the case they're referring to? Gionche shachat chatos bereisha. They shechted the chatos first. Keditzanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, im gilach al achas mishlashtan yatza. And Rav Akiva is of the opinion that once you shechted the carbon chatos, the din that we're going to get to in a few weeks, and Daf Mem Hey, that once you shechted the carbon chatas, you're able to do the gelicha, and that's the reason why you're not going to be able to be zarak shalei lishma now and eat the carbon. Therefore, that will not save the day. And we continue at the two dots, which the Gemara quotes the Mishnah. Rameir disagrees. Excuse me. Because he could just say, I don't want a wife that has a shaved head. Therefore, Rameir disagrees with the Tanakama. Rameir disagrees with Rabbi Akiva, and he says he could always be made for the neder. Ask the Gemara of a Tanakama, how does the Tanakama answer up this detail of Rameir? He seems to have a great taina. Amar lecha, says the Tanakama, you know what? What's the big deal? So she'll shave her head, she'll put on a sheitel. The Rameir Savar, no. But Pe'er Nachris, I did the Zuama. Loi Nichale. Pe'er Nachris are repulsive, says Rameir. Back in the day, wearing someone else's hair on your shaved head, no way. And therefore, Loi Nichale, therefore it's not something that he would want. So we have a sidebar machlokes going on here between Rameir and the Tanakama, whether the act of shaving the head itself is an act that makes her menovel, or do we say that she can just put on a sheitel? And we conclude today's shir with the Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, a man can make a neder for his son. And again, this we learned a few days ago, so it's going to bring us back to certain nedarim dekadinim. A man can make a neder on his son, bin Nazir, make his son a Nazir. However, if Anisha Madaris has been on Nazir, a woman cannot do the same. Ketzad, what is the case? Meaning, let's play out this case of a husband or a father being Madir the son. After the father makes him a Nazir, he goes and he shaves his head, or one of the relatives do. Micha, he protests, and the father already went and separated the animal for the Nazirus. Chatos, Tamos. So what do you have to do? You have to let the chatas die. And this is very similar to the din that we've been discussing. What happens if we have a Nazirus? We've been discussing in the context of a husband annulling the vow. Here we have a similar case. A father makes a neder Nazirus for his son, and then his son says, I don't want it. But the father already separated the carbon chatas, shlamim ra'ila, so what do you do right now? So says the Gemara, if it was a chatas, there's nothing to do. You got to just let it die. If it was a shlam marayla, you bring it as a shlam and ayla. And what's the halacha? As we've seen already, you only keep it for one day. You don't bring bread. If you just celebrate undesignated money, yiplul and nadava, as we've spoken about extensively, for the nadava, the communal offerings of the ayla for the dessert, the kais of the mizbeach. Mais mefurashim, demichatos, yichul yamamelech. After you destroy them, there's nothing you can do for them. You can't get benefit, nor is there me'ilah. Demei ayla, yiviu ayla, and the meilins did me'ilah bahen. Demei shlam, yiviu shlamim, and echol yom echad. Vein tunulachem. Very similar dinim like we saw of a husband who's made for his wife's neder and he separated the karbanos. And tomorrow we'll pick up from the Gemara in which it's going to dive deeper into this halacha of a father making a neder naziros for his son.